Good morning. Welcome to United First Parish Church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey, welcome to our Unitarian Universalist spiritual community. I'm the Reverend Rebecca Froom, zooming into you from our historic sanctuary here in the heart of Quincy. Our worship leaders this morning on screen and behind the screen are Joan McDonald, our Director of Religious Education, Norman Corey, our Music Director, Elizabeth Black, our virtual greeter, Bill Westland, who will be joining Joan in delivering the message for all ages, and Ruth and Carolyn, who performed that beautiful prelude we just heard. And we will also have a piece from our UFPC Virtual Choir. So beautiful music today. The order of service for this morning can be downloaded from our website, www.ufpc.org. We will also be pasting hymn lyrics in the chat as we go. If we have any guests with us this morning, on our website, www.ufpc.org, you can find out more information about us and how to be in touch with us after the service. For these online services, we encourage you to go ahead and leave your video on if you are comfortable with that, so that we can see each other screen to screen when we are in gallery view. That said, we know that Zoom fatigue is very real. So if turning your camera off will help you be most present this morning, please go ahead and do that. Note that we are recording this morning's service to be posted on YouTube at a later date. And finally, we invite everyone to stay after the service for our virtual social hour. Let us center ourselves for worship by taking a deep breath together, feeling the spirit of life, that spirit of love that moves within, between, and beyond us all. As we enter this space of worship, we acknowledge that our church is built on the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people, the Neponset Band. We acknowledge their stewardship of this land for generations, their presence here in this moment of time. We acknowledge the complicated history that has brought us to this space. May we go into our time of worship with gratitude and with open hearts. The kindling of our chalice is a way of creating a sacred space together. We encourage you, if you have a chalice or a candle at home, to go ahead and light that as Mamuda shares a chalice reading for us.
Good morning. We light this chalice, symbol of our UU faith, on the week ending the Muslim month of Ramadan and the celebration of Eid al-Fitr. I chose my favorite verse from the Quran, which has a bit of particle physics and a bit of mysticism and more together. It's called Surah Nur, the light. God is the light of the heavens and earth. The parable of God's light is that of a niche containing a lamp. The lamp is enclosed in glass, the glass shining like a radiant star. A lamp lit from a blessed tree, an olive tree that is neither of the east nor of the west. The oil is so bright that it would give light of itself, even though fire had never touched it. Light upon light. Thank you.
Please join me in speaking our covenant, which I'm posting in the chat now. There it goes. As a free fellowship of this historic church, we unite to lift our hearts and open our minds to a larger reality, to accept, support, and encourage one another, to seek the wisdom in all religions, to cherish and sustain the web of life, and to strive for justice, compassion, and peace. Now, will you please join me and raise our voices in song to sing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
This morning, I want to talk with UFPC member Bill Westland. And I'm just going to spotlight him too. Oops, add. About some of our congregation's history. Bill writes a selection of history vignettes and posts them on our website, as well as being a key figure in our History and Visitors program. As you know, we've been focusing on stewardship for the last few weeks. Bill, I'd like to know more about our history and how we were able to pay for the building and the minister when it was gathered more than 380 years ago in 1639.
Well, back in 1639, there was no separation of church and state. And so therefore, your tax dollar, which was collected by the town, part of it went for the upkeep of the town church and also the minister's salary. And it didn't make any difference whether you belonged to the church or not, you still had to pay this church tax. And so actually, it really behooved you to join the church because you had to be a church member to also serve as a selectman or any other elected office. But that's how they raised money back in those days.
So you mentioned to me something about the church being in disrepair, and I think it was in the early 18th century. Why would that happen?
Well, what happened is that a stone church was built in 1666. And it was on Hancock Street, about where the connector is. And it was stone, believe it or not, because they thought they might have to use it as a fortress in case of an Indian attack, which never happened. And what's going to happen back then is that the original Braintree was what is now Quincy, Braintree, Randolph, and Holbrook. And that church was the only church. And so if you lived in Randolph, you had to come all the way down here to go to church. And the town was split into the North Precinct, which was Quincy, the Middle Precinct, which was Braintree, and the South Precinct, which was Randolph and Holbrook. And what happened is they built a second church in Braintree, which is now the Braintree Congregational Church. This was in 1707. And now the tax money has to be divided between two churches, not one. And probably the majority of the town meeting members lived in the Middle and South District. So therefore, they didn't want a lot of money to church here. And so it went into disrepair. It got so bad that the holes in the roof were so big that in the wintertime, they actually had to shovel snow out in order to hold services. And so that eventually led to finally a third church being built, and that would be the Hancock Meeting House in 1732. But that's how we get in disrepair more than anything else.
So you mentioned to me that about pew taxes, that when people, in order to attend a church or to sit in a pew, would need to pay a tax or a rent on them?
Yeah, what happened originally, now that stone church that I was talking about, all right, now there were no pews, they were strictly benches. Now, when the Hancock Meeting House opened up, also there were benches, and you had the men sit on one side and the women on the other. Then what happened is the better people in town didn't want to do that any longer, so they were allowed to build box pews along the side. So I think there was something like 11 box pews that were built. And then what happened is that the town then had a pew tax. So they were collecting money on the pews, which of course then helped to fund the church. And then when the church was enlarged in 1808, the middle section were still benches. They were taken out and more pews were put in. So I think the enlargement of the Hancock Meeting House, there were over 80 some odd pews. And they in turn were sold. And of course, people then paid a pew tax. That was a good way to raise revenue. So that's how they did it back then.
So what happened if somebody stopped paying their pew tax?
Well, eventually, what's going to happen is that the town is going to eliminate the pew tax. But in its place, there will be a pew rental fee. So therefore, the money will go directly to the church and not to the town. Now, if you didn't pay your rental fee, the church had a right to go to court, foreclose, and sell your pew at public auction, which they did. So no fooling around back in those days. And we had Mr. Curtis here who thought this was illegal. So he went to court. It went all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and the church won. So that was a different time period.
So I know later on our church was considered historic, obviously, because we have the President's Adams and their wives buried in the crypt below. But you mentioned something about petitioning the US government to help take care of the building.
Yeah, you go back, this probably, I would say happened, it happened during the Carter administration. And of course, there was all sorts of repairs that had to be done in the church. It was expensive. You had that church state issue. No matter where you tried to get fund money and so forth, that church state. And so a delegation from Quincy, there was a city councilor, the congressman, Brian Donnelly, and maybe some of you old timers remember Dick Porter, who used to be a member here. And in fact, his family, one of the founding families of the church. And in fact, when he was here, he still used his old family pew and got mad if someone sat in there. Anyway, they went to Washington, and what they wanted to do was to have the National Park Service take over the building. And they'd be responsible for the upkeep, all the repairs and so forth. Meanwhile, we would be completely independent. We could do exactly what we wanted. There wouldn't be any control at all. And so they testified before a congressional committee. And what happened, the bill that was passed was not what anybody expected. The bill said that the church would be part of the Adams National Park, period. And there'd be no financial contributions at all. On top of that, if we ever disbanded, we could give the church to the national park. And so that wasn't the intent at all. So that is what I'm saying is we got nothing out of it. And the funny thing is that President Carter almost didn't sign that bill. He objected to even that limited thing of us being part of the national park. And I think, he being probably a devout Baptist, probably any church state thing, he just didn't like. That's all there was to it. But he finally did sign it. And so that's our relationship with the national park, which is practically nothing.
So I guess the last thing is, I guess in the last 20 years, in order to do some big renovations on the church, we had to sell something that was a part of our history in order to do that.
Yeah, that was the sale of the silver, which I think that was 2001. And up until that time, we had all sorts of attempts to raise money. Believe it or not, we had 2 fundraisers that went bankrupt on us. A third one dropped dead. And we were sort of the kiss of death if you wanted to raise money. And we tried all sorts of ways to raise money. None of them worked. And so we finally reached the point where we had this church silver, very valuable. It was in a bank vault, and it was brought out for just really one communion service at the end of the year. Then it was locked up again. And so we thought that the building itself and the church were more important than silver, which no one ever saw. So we decided to sell it. And much to our surprise, the sale brought in over $3 million. And I think we netted about 2.5 million out of it. And one cup, the bracket cup, brought in $770,000, set a record for church silver. And so you hate to give up an asset like that. But on the other hand, really, the only thing to do, that's all there was to it. And a lot of people objected. We an article in the New York Times against it, and but that's what we did. And it wasn't a mistake. No, I don't think so. So that's what happened with the silver.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think that whenever we get back together again in person, Bill Westland is a great person to talk to about history, and I can't wait until we can start doing the visitors tours again as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Remove my spotlight.
Thank you, Bill. Through the sharing of our joys and sorrows, we create a sacred space where we are deeply present with ourselves and one another. This is a time for us to share from the heart, knowing that a joy shared is a joy magnified, and also that a sorrow shared is a sorrow diminished. If you wish to briefly acknowledge a sorrow or a joy from your heart, I invite you to raise your hand and unmute your microphone when our digital usher, or in this case, when Joan calls you by name. And I want to begin by sharing a candle representing all of those joys and all of those sorrows that we hold silently in the sanctuary of our hearts. May the light of these candles and the compassion of this community remind us that wherever we are on our journey, each of us is worthy of love, and each of us is able to love. Let us take a deep breath together. Perhaps rolling our shoulders back, releasing some small bit of tension from our jaw, our hands, our heart. Let us breathe in together, breathe out, appreciating the gift of this day. And in this time when we are connected, screen to screen, heart to heart, breath to breath, let us enter a time of silent meditation. Will you lift your hearts and join me in the spirit of prayer, listening in these words for the language of faith most meaningful to you? Eternal presence, known by many names, known in many ways. We gather this morning at the height of spring, seeing the change day to day in buds and leaves and bird song in the length of the day. In this spirit of growth and abundance, we give thanks for the joys of our lives, for those vaccines that allow us to hug one another, to be in the presence of one another. May we remember the joy and the gratitude of these moments and carry that joy, that gratitude with us in our days and years to come. We give thanks for the relationships that sustain us. We give thanks for decades together, for the opportunity to affirm relationship, to celebrate the promise of relationship. And in this time of joy and this time of new beginnings, we also open our hearts to all those who struggle with their health, with scary diagnoses, with risky surgeries, all of those who are on a journey of recovery from surgery. May those who are struggling know strength, no health, no comfort. And as we care for our beloveds, may we offer them compassion. May we know that we are all held in a great and abiding love. Source of our goodness, source of our being, there is so much violence that rips through our country, through our world. We hold in our hearts the plight of the Palestinian people. We hold in our hearts all of those who are living with grief, with rage, with heartache in Palestine, in Israel, across the world. We pray for a true and lasting peace, a peace that includes justice, a peace that includes equity, a peace that includes dignity. In our own ways, in our own actions, in our own relationships, may we cultivate that peace in our hearts, our homes, our global community. We pray this in love's name. Amen. And blessed be. Our reflection music this morning is that prayer of a song, meditation on breathing. Sing along or let the words, the music flow over you. This rendition is performed by the musical group, The Unfolding.
When I breathe in, I'll
I am here in our historic sanctuary, our fourth building that is almost 200 years old. And in the before times and the future times, you will be sitting in these pews that are now in front of me, looking at these marble epitaphs to our most famous congregants, John and Abigail Adams, John Quincy and Louisa Catherine Adams. In this epitaph, John Adams is hailed as being our second US president. His diplomatic activities are glorified, and the plaque says that he pledged his life, fortune, and sacred honor to the independence of his country. That part is in capital letters, the independence of our country. We look back at these forefathers and foremothers and see the ways in which they were founding fathers, founding mothers of this country. When we look back, we see these bold letters praising their accomplishments. John Adams himself saw himself as a man of Massachusetts and saw himself as a farmer. As we look at our stewardship theme this year of sowing seeds, we have literally sown seeds in our gardens. Yesterday, we planted sunflower seeds that we will nourish through the summer so that their beauty can greet us in the late summer and early fall. So as we look at this metaphor of planting seeds, of nourishing seeds, of harvesting from the abundance of seeds, be it beauty or food, it is interesting to remember that John Adams, this man known for these great achievements, was a farmer. The rhythms of the earth, the rhythms of the work of planting and nourishing and harvesting were part of him. And it strikes me that this generation of our national forebearers are applauded for planting seeds of a new form of governance, applauded for their work to create this new democracy, and applauded for that revolutionary spirit. It strikes me that John Adams' generation not only plants seeds, but nourishes them, becoming the political farmer that carries us from revolution to republic, moving from writing declarations to writing constitutions. At the root of the word revolution is the word revolve, a turning. This year, last year and a half, we have been in our own moment of turning, a different sort of revolution, a time of great reckoning with what divides us and what unites us, a reckoning with our heritage of systems of white supremacy, a compassionate reckoning with how those systems are alive and harmful in our present moment, a reckoning with the economic divide in our country that shows up in disparities of healthcare and so many other ways. So over the last year, year and a half, the pandemic and how we have responded to us has illustrated a lot of what we want to turn away from. We want to turn away from income inequality that allows families to end up hungry and at the risk of eviction from being laid off for a few months or a year. We want to move away from that level of inequality. We want to move away from racism. We want to move away from the political divisions that tear us apart as a country, sometimes as a community, sometimes as a family. We want to move away from exploitive and toxic use of our natural resources that ultimately will harm all of us. And what are we turning towards? What, at this turning point in the pandemic, as we begin to take our masks off and see one another face to face as well as heart to heart, what are we turning towards? The whole last 14 months, people have been speaking from literal and virtual pulpits about how we don't want to return to the old normal, that we want to turn towards a new normal. And so this is the moment for us as individuals and as a congregation to think boldly about what that new normal will be. What seeds are we truly planting this spring? I see in our personal behaviors as folks are getting vaccines, as health recommendations are changing, I see people turning towards relationship. That opportunity to visit with multi-generational families, that opportunity to go to a place we've called home or known as the home of our hearts, a turning towards connection, which of course includes the use of fossil fuels, which of course means that we are spending money on some things, but not other things. I too am turning towards family and spending money on gas to get to new places. There's no one right way to enter this new normal. And so I wonder, what seeds can we be planting here in this congregation to compassionately challenge ourselves to live in this world in new ways that honors that precious web of life that we speak of every Sunday? How can we help one another through those personal choices? How can we help one another think about how to share our power and our resources to work for change in values-based ways? As the world opens up within our national borders, at least, what seeds are we planting and nourishing? When our institutional ancestors look back at us in 50 years, in 200 years, in almost 400 years, what story will they be telling about how we respond to this moment? Friends on the journey, we've heard today about all the ways in which the pews have been filled, the pews have been funded in this building and the buildings where we gathered decades earlier, centuries earlier. We know that these pews will again have people in them. And as we gather in familiar ways and new ways, let this be a place where our hearts indeed are opened to a larger reality. Let this indeed be a place where we can come together to grieve for all that has been lost, and come together to think boldly and act boldly about our future as a community and how our community will affect our future as a larger community beyond the congregation. Let us plant seeds, seeds of hope, and nourish them to grow into flowers that nourish us with beauty and possibility. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. Our next music piece this morning is Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, sung by our UFPC Virtual Choir. So you can go ahead and sing along as a hymn or sit back and appreciate this beautiful piece as an anthem.
Come thou fount of every blessing, to our hearts to sing thy praise. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. For the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love. Teach us ever to be faithful, may we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of one false silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us find ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earthly fairest heaven above.
Each spring, we hold a pledge drive where we ask a member where we ask our members to pledge money for our coming fiscal year. And during this time, we ask a member or a friend to give a brief testimonial about what this church means to them and why they make a financial commitment to the spiritual community. Today, we hear from David Fallon. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Reverend Rebecca. I didn't grow up in a religious household or had any direct connection. I am part Jewish, Protestant, and Catholic. My mom told me when she was a little girl, she went to Quaker services, but she also observed Jewish holidays. When I was a little boy, my friends would take me to their church, but it seemed very scary to me, especially to an 8-year-old, when no one explained the rituals to me. So I went through my young life not joining any church. It was very alien to me. But at the time, I was dealing with loss and disappointment. I was, like most, wondering what to do with my life. My nature, I'm a loner, but part of me wanted to be part of a community of people. I had a family, but they were thinning away. I belonged to an art community, but that was very competitive and very distant community that was always in flux. I also felt helpless in the events that were happening in the country and the world. And I was feeling powerless and not able to do anything about it. At the same time, I was becoming a sole caregiver to an ailing parent. But there was a difference about being a loner and being isolated. I was a boat without a rudder traveling in circles. Now I can't really say what made me really walk into the First Parish Church on that January day. I did listen to some recordings from sermons by Reverend Rebecca on the internet. I also passed the church hundreds of times wondering what goes on inside. The day I walked in, I was greeted kindly. I took the last seat in the back. The atmosphere was very pleasant. After the first visit, I didn't feel out of my element, so I came back. It was a while when I joined Social Hour. No one pushed any agenda on me. No one dropped a butterfly net on me. I did draw a strong sense of community and respect and belief in many forms of spirituality. It was a while before I felt ready to join. At the time, my mother was getting sicker and now was in hospice. At this time, I realized how important to have people to lean on. I also knew that being involved in helping others was more helpful to me. When my mother passed, I was basically on my own. I also the COVID virus was shutting down the country, but the church found ways of continuing its ministry. When I joined, instead of wallowing in sadness, I volunteered. I've heard through life it is to be grateful, but I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. But now I understand. It's about those who have less than you, and you have many gifts to give back to others. You are not alone. Now you are part of a community.
Thank you, David, for that moving testimony and for your presence in our congregation. As we have mentioned, we are in the midst of our annual Stewardship Drive. This is a time to pledge for the coming year, July 2021 to June 2022. Our pledge drive runs through next Sunday, May 23rd. So we encourage you to ask you to fill out your pledge form, reflecting on your own values and what this community means to you. And even as we look ahead, we take up our weekly offering to support the good works of United First Parish Church. So I encourage you to go to our website, www.ufpc.org. When you click on the donate button, you can make either a one-time donation as part of our weekly offering, or you can set up an ongoing monthly donation through that donate button. And an online version of our pledge form is also available on our website. So let us open our hearts as these gifts to support the good work of United First Parish Church are joyfully given and gratefully received. I invite you to place your hands over your heart for our words of benediction by Gary Kowalski. And now may the blessings of life be upon us and upon this congregation. May the memories we have gathered here give us hope for the future. May the love that we share bring strength and joy to our hearts, and the peace of this community be with us until we meet again. May we go in peace and go in love to be a blessing to the world. Please join me in singing "Carry the Flame" as we extinguish our chalice. A beautiful breath of music from our congregants this morning. Thank you. There are many ways for us to gather for the life and leadership of this congregation. Our announcements are emailed out to the congregation on Thursday or Friday and can be downloaded from our website. As always, our biweekly children's chapel services are also available on our website. And every Thursday, a group gather here for a standout of Quincy for Black Lives from 3:30 to 5:30. Looking further ahead to some of our upcoming special events, we will be having 1 week from today, our annual meeting. We are a democratic organization, so once a year we gather to vote in our new elected leaders to the Board of Governors, Committee on Ministry, and Nominating Committee to approve the budget and to hear some updates and perhaps give feedback on what various committees have been doing. So that will be at 11:45 a.m. next Sunday in this Zoom room. So please do log in for that, members, and friends are welcome too, but members for voting. As I've mentioned, yesterday we planted sunflowers in our garden on the Temple Street side, the South Lawn, and we have committed philosophically and also tangibly to be stewards of that garden. So you can contact Claire Fitzmaurice to potentially join the garden committee. And Claire is doing a series of work days over the summer. Is Claire here with us? I'm not, maybe understandably taking a deep breath in her own space. Well, I believe that we are having a work day 2 weekends from now, Saturday, May 29th. That's Memorial Day weekend. Details to follow. Sarah Belfort has added, no fear, not really a committee, just a fun garden working group. So if you want to join the fun garden working group, contact Claire Fitzmaurice, or come 2 weekends from now and join Claire and me and Micah and others to work in our garden. And now let us continue a time of connection and conversation in our virtual social hour. Joan will be setting up 2 breakout groups, so go ahead and accept that invitation.